Savage, here he goes.
What's up, 76ers fans? Marc Zumoff here. And I know what's up. A much better performance by the Sixers in this game 4. I'd love to take your questions here. Just, go into the chat and ask me some questions, and I'd be pleased to provide some answers. In the meantime, as I wait for your questions in the private chat, let me just say that the Sixers certainly needed this game more than the Celtics, and it showed from the very beginning. They were much more active defensively right off the bat. It was really good to see Tyrese Maxey get himself into the game defensively with those 2 steals early on, and you just had a feel that it was going to be a much different half than certainly the quality of play from the Sixers than we saw in Game 3. Certainly, it has made a big difference on the defensive end. Jason Tatum, his only field goal of the game, coming late in the second quarter. I don't believe Al Horford got a field goal, and it's been a miserable three-point shooting game for the Celtics, with the notable exception of Jaylen Brown, who was red hot early, and of course Malcolm Brogdon coming off the bench as well. The Sixers were able to make their move, actually, when Brown was forced to the bench with his 2 personal fouls after playing only about 7 minutes of the first quarter. The teams were tied, and they stayed tied for about the next minute or so. And then the Sixers realized, hey, you know what? No more torturing from Jaylen Brown. We can make a move here. And indeed, they did. So it's just great to see them more active defensively. That's the way I always view the game, on the defensive end. And the Sixers were able, at least for that half, to right their ship on that end of the floor. Now let's take a look at the offensive end. First of all, Joel Embiid, not only making his catches up top, but many more catches on the side of the lane, which I'm happy to see. And he's been able to back his way in for some field goals in the paint. I'll have more on that in just a moment. But first, I have Mike Casey here asking, what am I worried about the Celtics changing for the second half? Well, I think if you're the Celtics, you have to get Jason Tatum going. There's no question about it. There's no way you're going to win a game with Tatum getting only 1 field goal and a half. So obviously that has to change for them. Maybe they switch it up and they double team and beat a little bit more than they did in that first half. And certainly the dribble penetration of James Harden, which was a problem. It was great, certainly as a Sixers fan, to see Harden do that. He's playing with a much better rhythm, certainly with much more confidence. And it's just amazing, the human condition. A guy like Harden, a 7-time All-Star, to have the kind of game that he did in Game 3 and able to come back in Game 4. And quite frankly, I thought he was going to be even more aggressive offensively, but he let the game come to him and ultimately played a much better half than he did the entire Game 3. So, Mike Casey, thank you so much again. For those of you who are joining us here at halftime on YouTube, the Sixers lead the Celtics by 9, and you are invited to ask some questions here on the private chat. We have Zach Hoying asking, what's the biggest difference with Harden this game versus the last 2 games? I'm at a loss, other than to say that he looks more confident. Where that confidence came from, I don't know. He doesn't seem to be settling. A lot of his game is getting the defender out of rhythm with his own unique style of playing offense. He certainly did that in the first half, but I like the fact that he's driving the ball a lot more. He's not settling. And maybe it's just biorhythms or good karma or something like that. But Harden looks more like the guy the Sixers need if they're to get past the second round once and for all. So while I can't identify anything specifically from an X and O standpoint, maybe it's just something inside of Harden which is allowing him to play better. So, Zach, thank you so much for your question. Michael Shane, what's your objective Sixers series prediction? When it comes to the Sixers, Michael, I am never I'm just not. I spent 40 years covering the team. I spent 27 years as the TV voice of the team. Actually, I think I can be a little bit objective and say this. It's going to be hard for the Sixers to win this series because they're going to have to win another game in Boston. So if you think that they now split, they lose Game 5, they come back and win 6. So now you have to win a Game 7 in Boston, which of course is never easy. It's going to be a very tall order, to say the least, and that's why I think it's going to be really difficult. And it's funny too, because when people were asking me at the end of the regular season, how do you think the Sixers are going to do in the playoffs? My stock answer was they have to win a game in Boston. Well, now they have to win 2 games, and that's going to be very tough because the Celtics, they are, and I don't have to tell you this, uh, one of the better teams in the NBA. But the stat that I found, and I may have said this recently on a chat, uh, I think they're the only team in the NBA that ended the regular season in the top 10 in offensive and defensive ratings. In other words, the top 10 in both of those areas. Uh, the offensive rating and the defensive rating based on 100 possessions or points given up per 100 possessions. Because if you play at a different tempo, you might be a good defensive team, but you give up 115 points because you play at a fast tempo. This sort of levels the playing field. And the Celtics are an excellent team, really, on both ends. But the Sixers, I think the adjustment they really made with Embiid, particularly making catches on different parts of the floor. They did change the angle, the pick and roll, not so much up top, but a little bit more on the side. And I think that's really helped. So, Michael, thank you very much for your question. Again, if you do have a question, and we thank you so much for joining us on YouTube, make sure you send that question to us in the private chat. And don't forget, I'm still active, even though I'm not announcing games anymore. An opportunity for you to subscribe to Fresh 24 with Marc Zumoff. It is our brand new podcast, and we've already had some very interesting guests. And the object of the podcast is to bring in not only current and former coaches and players and front office folks, but anybody who is a Sixer fan, notable people. Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, we plan on having him on very shortly. In fact, that might even happen as soon as next Wednesday. And, famous stars, in my fantasy world, I hope to get Bradley Cooper or somebody like that. So please subscribe to Fresh 24 with Marc Zumoff, and you'll get your Sixer fix that way as well. Here's Julian Gross wanting to know, what do you think of the rotation so far this half? Well, I think Doc pushed all the right buttons. At one point, the Sixers, I think, were 0 for 7, 0 for 8, something like that from beyond the arc. They were able to get George Niang into the game, and he gave him a couple of threes. DeAnthony Melton put his stamp on this game on both ends of the floor, particularly the defensive end as well. And of course, you're going to have B-Ball Paul in there to spell Joel Embiid, and that was it. So it was a tight rotation. Only 8 players to play in that first half for the Sixers head coach Doc Rivers, and we'll see what happens in the second half. But something tells me it'll be a tight rotation there as well. So, Julian, thank you very much again. For those of you who are watching here on YouTube, go to the private chat, send me a question, and I will try to get to it. Sydney Nutter, do you think Tobias should be benched for now? He's not playing well. Let me say this: if you bench him, you have to ask yourself who you're going to play in his place. Number one. Number two, he is still, I know he's not lighting the world on fire offensively. Remember, he's the 4th option out there to begin with, but I think he's way too important on the defensive end of the floor to bench. So that's my opinion on Tobias. And there might be a point in this series somebody gets into foul trouble or something like that, or God forbid there's an injury, and you need Tobias Harris to have his head in the game and have his confidence and to go out there and score for you. So I'm not sure, Sydney. I know you might be a little bit frustrated, and I appreciate that, but I don't think that there would be any plan to bench Tobias Harris. So, Sydney, thank you very much for the question. Again, if you do have a question, and we're closing in on the third quarter, but before we get there, again, if you have a question, you can go into the private chat and send it to me. Here is Al Jaskell asking, if Tatum plays like Tatum this half, do the Sixers win? Yes, absolutely. There's no way the Celtics can win, just like the Sixers can't win with James Harden playing the way he did in Game 3 or Game 2 for that matter. It's just not going to happen. He's got to get his, because when you're the coach and you put out the lineup, that's what you expect. You pencil a guy in for X amount of points and rebounds and assists and whatever. And Harden has been he's been James Harden in the first half. Tatum's going to have to play his way out of it if you're the Celtics, and it wouldn't surprise me to see a play or two designed for Tatum to try to get him off early in the third quarter. So, Al, thank you very much for the question. Fetty Rodriguez asking, why do we always fail to do the box out? We always give up too many rebounds. And let me say this, Fetty, there is not a coach around when they see their team giving up an offensive rebound that doesn't think, what are we doing? We got to box out. That's like first grade type stuff. And so, yes, oftentimes that's what it's about. But I will say this for the Sixers: they won the rebounding battle in the first half. They won the turnover battle, and the fact that you get more possessions is always one of the big keys in any basketball game. And I thought Fetty, they did a much better job in limiting the Celtics, particularly loose balls and offensive rebounds and whatnot. I didn't think it was as much of a problem as it was in games 2 and 3. So Fetty, thank you very much. Rob Skillen asking, do you think Tobias is being forced more playing time because of his contract? I think I understand this. Do you think Tobias is being forced more playing time because of his contract? I'm not quite sure what the question is asking, but I don't think there's any coach anywhere that is thinking about a player contract, whether there are incentives built in for more playing time or less playing time or certain achievements, that sort of thing. He's there to use a player for whatever he thinks they can do to help him or help the team in a particular instance. So, Rob, I'm not quite sure what you're asking there. I apologize, but I really don't think that at any moment that Doc Rivers considers a player's contract when he's putting guys into a game or whatever. We've started the third quarter. I'll take one more question real quick. Andre Brittingham, would you consider giving Melton Maxey's minutes? I think if they need something on the defensive side of the ball, which could happen in the second half if they have themselves a lead and they want to try to prevent some points late. But I think Maxey overall has had a pretty decent first half, and I don't see him taking Maxey's place anytime soon. So for those of you who tuned in or participated or both and sent me a question, it was great being with you for halftime. Thanks very much for joining me on YouTube. And don't forget, subscribe to Fresh 24 with Marc Zumoff, my new podcast. If you're a Sixers fan, it's sure to please. Take care, everybody, and thanks so much once again.